Hey, what's going on today, guys? Boom Maddox, and I'm super excited today to be launching my first podcast. The goal and the premise of this podcast was to start interviewing some of the top real estate agents that I've come across in just in my everyday life. Part of what I do and part of my entire life has been spent getting to know real estate agents, figuring out what makes them tick, learning about their business, and learning about what makes actually a really good real estate agent. The last number that I saw was that there are just over 27, almost 28,000 real estate agents in the state of Utah. And so what I wanted to do was figure out a way to create value and introduce you as a consumer, you as a buyer, you as a seller to some of these agents that I am working with that I think are just top notch. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm interviewing only the agents that I would recommend, but what I think it does mean is that I can interview and I can try to get out some of the details for people, some of the details that you might not be able to get as a normal consumer, and really get to know who some of these real estate agents are. Having said that, our very first guest today, his name is Kyle Tucker. Kyle Tucker started in real estate just over a year and a half ago and has done more transactions than I would say the majority of real estate agents will in their entire career. I think one of the things that makes Kyle very good at what he does is his direct and his focus on what the numbers are saying outside of just the emotional attachment to a real estate product. I think he's fantastic at what he does. We've done over 100 transactions together, and I would recommend him to anybody that's looking to buy or sell a house. I think he's unbelievable to work with, especially if you are an investor-minded individual, and if you're trying to say, hey, how can I make this house an investment for me? So without further ado, episode 1 of the Who's Your Agent podcast, Kyle Tucker. Okay, we're live. Welcome. Very first episode. We appreciate you being our first guest. You're going to kind of be the guinea pig here.
Sweet.
So we wanted to invite a friend onto the show. So we're super grateful that you're here today.
Good.
Okay, so kind of getting into everything, the first things that we want to start to cover, as people are shopping around and they're trying to figure out, right, there's over 28,000 agents in the state of Utah. And I think in order to figure out why somebody should use you as their agent, whether they're buying or selling a house, we kind of need to go back to the beginning, right? So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how you got to almost be sitting in this chair, right? Where you were at when you started real estate, why you got into it. Kind of go through that and let's talk through it a little bit.
Sure. I have kind of an interesting background, kind of a non-traditional path to real estate, and two pathways converge to one. So the first is, historically, I come from tech. So I went to school, bachelor's, master's degree in a kind of a hybrid computer science MBA type degree, went and worked for a couple different unicorn companies, helped one go public, and that was my world. Obviously with those types of things going on, there was some excess funds and I started investing.
Well, that's how we got to know each other, right? Was with you as a buyer first before you ever even thought about being an agent.
Correct. So that's kind of where, this other pathway comes is as I'm over here in tech, I start investing, and it started with Yubu and with Edge. And I continued in tech for quite a while. I think it was probably from my first purchase to when I actually became like full-time agent was like maybe 3 years. So
how many units do you think you bought in that time? I know you bought the house, the Lehigh house, and then probably 4 or 6.
It was kind of like once a year type thing. I mean, when you're working on a salary, there's only so much you can put aside, but if you can do that, it definitely pays off. So yeah, probably 3, 4, 5 units over those years. That started building over there.
So then what made you kind of step back and say, okay, I have a 6-figure, hopefully that's not inappropriate for me to share, but you had a 6-figure job. You were absolutely crushing it in the tech world. You had your MBA. Life was going the direction that it should have been for you, right? A lot of agents that I talk to and get to know, their life was not, I don't want to say in shambles because that sounds bad, but they weren't, real estate, the barrier to entry is low at times, right? It's 120 hours of schooling, and past that, there's no clear defined method of saying, hey, this is how you're going to be a successful agent, right? So sometimes the barrier to entry is low, right? I didn't go to school. I didn't get a degree. I took my 120 hours of online school and I was licensed, right? So what made you kind of step back and say, okay, I've been investing for a couple of years now, bought a couple of properties, right? I think I don't want to take any credit that I shouldn't be taking, but you and I had a lot of candid conversations about what my life was as a real estate agent, right? And I think that kind of started to spark some stuff for you.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was interesting because there was this point where part influenced by you, part was due to a leadership program by name of Abundant, where I was getting some coaching, and there was just a lot of people around me that were like, hey, my background, they said, hey, your background's in data science and analytics, and the way you're doing things is just, it's very different, and you should help other people do that. And I was like, huh, okay. So I began that journey of like, maybe I should get my license and maybe I should start helping people, just kind of as a side hustle.
Well, yeah. And even take a step back, because I remember when you originally came to me and you said, hey, I think I'm going to start referring friends over. What does that look like if I was to refer friends over? I mean, I can genuinely say you did not get into this for the money, right? Because your focus, right, when you started sending me some of those early buyers before you were licensed, it was not to say, hey, let me get paid, right? Your focus was what?
Yeah, I think really I cared deeply about individuals winning and the people around me winning. I didn't become an agent to make the money. I actually was kind of trying to not become an agent early on, which was kind of an interesting approach.
I almost felt that, right? I almost felt like you were doing everything that you could to not become an agent.
Yeah, and I was trying to...
not because you didn't want to be an agent, right? But I don't want to speak out of turn, but obviously where we know each other a little bit better, I feel like I can take some liberties. I feel like you almost didn't want... If you did it from a friend standpoint, it was very easy to say, hey, this is what I think you should do, but it's not on me if it doesn't go well, right? Yeah. And it almost became like a confidence in yourself and what you were doing.
Totally. And it was interesting as the way it unfolded, because the way we were kind of in lockstep and doing things, it wasn't necessarily turning out the same for those buyers, not because of the things we were purchasing or what we were doing, but just some of the parties involved. We had to kind of switch things up. And I felt there was maybe too many cooks in the kitchen. And I'm like, hey, I know I can absolutely create a pathway. We can create a pathway for these people to crush it, but they're getting derailed by other opinions, thoughts, whatever it might be. And that's where I was like, I'm going to have to get my license. I'm going to have to help these people, because they kind of, the moment that I was handing them off, there was a lot of like disconnect. And so we went from there, and I got my license and starting to help those people.
How long ago was that?
That was, it was right when COVID hit. Yeah. So it was,
beginning of like 2020.
And I started my license. It wasn't a COVID thing. I started it before COVID, and it was ironic because I literally finished schooling right when COVID hit. I was probably a couple weeks after that, and they'd shut down all testing centers. So I actually couldn't get my license for like 3 more months.
Yeah.
So I didn't officially become licensed till June of that year because there was no testing available. And that's how that actually started. One thing I want to add and make sure that, those listening can hear is where it really like aha'd for me is historically, if you look back at my role in tech companies, I was an operations manager. I led some consulting services. I worked a lot with executives, which put me in very high level executives. Yeah. I mean, these people are making, some of them 7 figures. I won't do the math. There's 7 figures. They have stock tranches. They'll make $2 million extra bucks, whatever it might be. And my job was to advise them on the decisions they were making. Now, it's not like I'm sitting in their office all day, but once or twice a week, we would bring in data and information on how the business is going and counsel them on like, hey, here's some shifts we might want to do, or these are some things we might not want to do. And then ultimately it's their decision. But I was a master of finding, curating, putting together and telling a story with data, and then providing it to the executive and then letting them run with it.
Which I would say is, as somebody that was helping you purchase some of these investment properties, that was your structure. That was your method of madness. Yep. When it came to just buying your own properties, right? Yep. Which is what I think allowed you. And like I said, I don't want to get into too many details that I shouldn't know and then be sharing. But one of the things people always ask me is, how is he buying like he is, right? Because you didn't make enough money. Yep. To be purchasing as many units as you were, but you knew the math behind it, right? You knew the facts, you knew the figures, you knew all that information behind it.
Yeah, and that's, I think, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit more later, but it's something that I pride myself in being very different from most all agents out there, is like my ability to calculate and to be creative. I feel I could go toe to toe with pretty much anybody, and I'd probably argue I'm easily one of the, or if not the top performer in the state on that front. Now
we'll get into that. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. But I love. Let's go back to that just a little bit. The structure that you were using with these big tech companies, right? Because that's all that. As somebody that grew up in Utah, I drive past the Adobe building. I drive past these big buildings. So go through that strategy just a little bit more, like some of those things that you were doing early that kind of helped set you on this course to being one of the top up and coming agents in the state, right?
Yeah, and I think. it's kind of exactly what I said, where, putting that data together, as many pieces as possible, good, bad, the ugly, every direction, and then painting a picture that's very, very objective, not subjective. This is something that's very important in the marketplaces. There's always subjective information. You want to get to the objective information. But taking all of that and then presenting it and then advising on it. And so that very same thing I was doing for executives, all of a sudden after I was helping client and the next client, I'm
Who weren't clients, right? Because you weren't licensed at that point.
When they were friends. Yeah,
they were friends and family.
I'm like, I'm doing the exact same thing. Like, cause ultimately I'm not advising. I'm not saying, hey, you should buy this. It's like, hey, point A, point B, C, and D all together make things look like this. So what do you think you should do? And it like was obvious, right? And that's the story that honestly, even to date, I continue to use. Even with market shifts as of recent, like I am continuing trying to adjust, and I'm an investor first and foremost before I'm an agent. And so people can always know I'm not here to bullshit you. I'm not here to like make up some story. It's like, here's reality. So right when rates went crazy just recently, I kind of paused. I had to like sit for a second and be like, okay, how do I personally navigate this?
How would you invest in this current market?
And now that I've figured that out, I'm back on the phone with my investors saying, hey, here's the steps we can take and here's where we can still win right now, even though the market shifted.
Well, yeah, so let's talk through that a little bit, because you stayed in tech sales after you got licensed for about a year or so, right?
Probably a little over a year.
What was it that finally convinced you, okay, I'm going to leave? I don't want to call it cush, right? But you had it made. You had what everybody that went down your path wanted to get to.
Yeah.
What was kind of that tipping point for you that said, okay, I'm in?
Yeah, it's a great question, because for those that have heard me talk or listen to some of my content, I'm very, very deep into purpose and into why you do what you do. I care a lot about the future of the human race, where we're going, what people believe in and practice, and just the openness and kind of opportunities that exist out there. And so I ran both real estate and tech because I honestly felt they were both making a difference in the world. You know, in real estate, I was changing individuals' lives, families. The tech company I was at the time was actually changing the financial situation of families as well. So I was kind of running the same vein, just in two ways. And in 2021, and those that know this story, like, and that were close to me, they saw and firsthand experienced how it almost kind of pains me to talk about, like how stretched I got.
Yeah.
And it turned into from like a full-time job and a side hustle to like two more than full-time jobs because
let's
of how
get into the
well
numbers.
everything
Let's
was
get into
going.
the numbers really quick, because obviously I know that.
Yeah.
Minimum 40 hours a week at tech, right?
Minimum, yeah. And it turned into, I mean, that's where I was when I started the side hustle. And then as when I first got my license, I wasn't managing a team. And then eventually I was managing 8 professionals, and they were each assigned to an executive, and like work was important. Like we were high stakes. And so
all at the same time that the world was shifting completely from what the
100%.
paradigm was in 2019, right?
Yeah. So we're putting in, I mean, I don't know, at 50, 60 hours, and sometimes there's some downtime, and sometimes there's a lot of uptime, because as a manager, you're kind of on call.
But let's say an easy 40 to 50 hours a week. On top of that, in 2020, how many units did you move?
I honestly don't know.
Ballpark?
I think I cut my chalk line a year into being an agent, so it would have been mid-2020 to mid-2021. Shoot, I don't remember the numbers. I want to say 60 or 80 units.
Which, to put it into perspective, the average agent will sell what in a year?
7.
Yeah, anywhere from like 6 to 15. I mean, the top agents are going to be moving anywhere from 20 to 40 units a year. Mm-hmm. And in your first year, where let's call it what it is, you still didn't know what you were doing to an extent. You didn't have your systems. You didn't have your business built like you do currently. No. So you were stretched. You were hammered. You were exhausted during those months.
And I told everybody, people are like, how do you even do? And I was like, well, I wake up 6 to about 8:30 is real estate. 8 to noon is tech, noon to 1 is real estate, 1 to 5 is tech, 5 to 10 is real estate. And that was what I was doing for probably a solid, I mean, there's 8, 9, 10 months in there, and it was bad.
All at the same time, I think you bought another 5 to 6 units yourself, right?
Yes.
So you're still investing actively and dealing with the stresses and the nuances that come from going through your own purchases.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So all of that was kind of happening. What kind of made you tip towards the real estate, which now you're full-time real estate, right? Yep. What tipped you?
I I think it was somewhere in there where just I realized that neither party, like my team in tech and then also my clients within real estate, was getting 100% of me. And that really pained me because I'm someone who cares deeply about the people I'm working with. And I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to find a way, but neither party was getting it. And I had to kind of decide. And unfortunately, but fortunately, working for a corporation isn't going to necessarily reward you the same as working for yourself, which is where I made that shift to be 100% independent and go off on my own.
Well, so now we're a year or so removed from that time. Tell us, paint us a little bit of a picture now, kind of what your life looks like and the business that you've built and the direction that you're currently moving within real estate.
Yeah. So I'm on the Perry Group, which is one of Utah's top teams, and currently partnering with Michael Perry, who's the founder of the team, to open up an office in Utah County and expand our footprint within the state of Utah. We dominate the Salt Lake area, and we're a very well-known name, and we have high hopes and high anticipations to dominate the Utah County area. Already have a footprint and foot in the door there, but there is no dominant player down here. And we look forward to mentoring and coaching agents, new agents, experienced agents, but expanding the Perry Group as a whole to ultimately do $1 billion in transactions in a single year, which no team has ever done.
It's a nutty number.
Yeah.
It's a crazy number.
It's crazy. Yeah. So I think to go back to the question is like, what is it like? Like kind of going off my own is like, hey, I'm doing my thing. Like I got to make money. And now it's like, that's kind of all afterthoughts. Really right now, my focus and passion is within developing other human beings. You know, I was able to push over 100 transactions last year. And now that wasn't closing, that's under contract. Because I do a lot of new constructions and you know that, but I'm not necessarily the one that wants to do another 100 and another 100, another 100, or go to 200. I'd rather develop the people around me and help 3 others get to 100, which is kind of an interesting approach, but I ran myself ragged and I'd prefer not to do that again.
Yeah.
So help somebody else do it and give them the protection that they need. Because mind you, part of last year still was tech. So it was too much for sure.
Well, so let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into the clients because you're still obviously working with clients and you're still currently working with investors. Who would you say, right? And I know that the cliche answer is always going to be, I'll work with everybody. That's what every single real estate agent says, right? But who would you say are your 2 or 3 avatars, your 2 or 3 prototype that like, if that buyer is listening to this, they have to call Kyle Tucker. Like,
yeah.
Who does that person look like for you now currently?
That's a great question. And I've settled more into the answer of this as of recent because I used to be the one that was like, yeah, I'll just work with anybody. No, that's not the case. I want to work with the people that want to become financially independent, that have a fairly decent income stream. Probably I'd say a minimum of maybe 80K. 6 figures is great. I work with a lot of higher performers, but there's no exact on compensation. Really, a principle that I coach and teach about, it's called the gap. So you have your income here and your expenses here. And a lot of people, you can make 60 grand and spend 55. You can make 180 grand and spend 175. Like those people are no different in my mind. Now, the person I love is like the person who has a gap of like 80 grand a year, right? They're making 120 and they spend 40, or they make 100 and they, you know, whatever it might be. Maybe it's 200 and they spend 80. So they have a $120,000 gap, right? That gap is essentially their disposable income. That's the funds that we can actually start to build their empire. And I get really excited about it. I know there's transactions there for me and there's financial gain for me, but like, that's not what I care about. Like it is fun winning with people who haven't ever gone on that adventure. And we get into it, and like I've got a couple clients now that
might not. I don't want to cut you off, but they might not think that adventure is for them, right?
Totally.
They're not making enough.
Totally.
Which, like I said, going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, people were asking, how is Kyle buying these units? He's not making enough money to buy it, right? Because they don't understand that theory, right? So that theory that got you into real estate is what you still love and put an emphasis on today, right?
Yeah, it's maximizing a lot of tools. And the people who know and hear this will know what I'm talking about. People who don't know will have this just completely go over the head. But like there are tools and financial resources out there that the wealthy use that are not available kind of on the public front line. This is what's crazy. Like, there is a loan program within Utah at a local credit union that you cannot find on the internet and you cannot find out in store unless you know who to walk in and ask, and you have to be referred in by someone else, and then you tap into that program. And it's like, wait, what? And you know, all of a sudden have access to unique investor funding that you can maybe buy double what you think you can buy because you have a 10% investor loan with no PMI, which is kind of unheard on the marketplace.
It's crazy.
Right? So things like that. And there's other tools that we use as well, but like the combination of them all can do some, I want to use the right words here on the podcast, but just do some terrific things for the financial portfolio of somebody. Yeah.
So what is it like for somebody to work with you, would you say? Like, from a client standpoint, what is, because I think it's very different for you. You are very non-transactional, which is why I think you've seen a lot of transactions early on, and you are more focused on the long term. And I don't want to put words in your mouth or call you something that you're not. I would very much say that your goal is, and your focus when you're working with buyers and with sellers, is you want to coach.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, I sit down with them and we develop a wealth plan. We're talking 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I show them what's possible. And to be quite frank, like, certain transactions in real estate are, they're the vehicle, right? And you're talking to somebody here that's invested in crypto, in stocks, who's made money in all the silly things. I made money in meme stocks. I made money in crypto. I made money on, someone asked, how did you get that payment for that house? And I was like, well, I put 10 grand into Tesla and then it was like 90 grand. So I pulled it out and bought another house. And they're like, what? So, like, I've invested in a lot of other avenues, but after really getting in, and I've developed a team now. If you work with me, I have a team, and it's an entire kind of an end-to-end experience, including kind of the capstone that I absolutely love. It's more advanced real estate, but a tax advisory team. And the benefits that real estate can give you are just absolutely disgusting in comparison to a lot of asset classes. And so you're actually talking to somebody that has withdrawn quite a bit of funds from other areas to just allocate all to real estate. Obviously being smart, being cautious, staying a little bit balanced. But after really getting into the depths of what's possible, you can make money like 3 different ways on one single piece of real estate, whereas everything else, it's one way and then you get taxed. Whereas we actually make money on the taxes. We don't pay taxes when you own real estate. So it's kind of an interesting concept, but it's something that we love doing for our clients.
If you could give one piece of advice, right? I always tell people, every single person that I meet with, it doesn't matter if they're buying their first house, if they're buying their 10th with us as an investor, the piece of advice that I always give them is this: even if you don't buy a house from me, still buy something. Mm-hmm. You're laughing because you've heard me say that to a ton of different buyers. Yeah. Give some value, right? Give some value to the people that are listening, for the people that, even if they're not going to use Kyle Tucker to help represent them.
Yeah.
What advice, what knowledge, what little nugget can you leave with them?
I think it's 3 pieces.
A 3-piece nugget?
3-piece nugget.
Okay.
But it stems off the nugget you just gave, right? If you're not buying from me, buy. Grant Cardone talks about that. Like, one of his main principles is like, never sell.
Yeah.
Anything he's ever sold, he's gone back and be like, you know what? We should have kept that. So, like, I am never someone that's like, hey, you should buy and then you should sell it. And you should, like, I'm not like,
and let me represent you on both the buy and the sell,
No, it's
right?
like, let's build. Now, we're in a little bit of a unique time, and we have to assess the situation and see if there's other options that work better for us. But, like, get something, because if you look at the history of real estate, especially, like, you look at Utah, it's a great example. There is, and I've heard this from multiple voices that I highly respect, but it's like, there is never a bad time to buy real estate in Utah. People are listening are probably like, that's not true. No, let me finish. There is never a bad time to buy. There is a bad time to sell. Okay, so there's been a couple blips that have dropped down. Well, you need to be in a position where you're not over leveraged and you can actually navigate that moment, so you're not panic selling, right? And so that is something as part of, like, when I work with individuals and develop those wealth plans, we make sure that we're prepared for any type of hiccups. I know right now we there's some uncertainty on the horizon. It may hit us. It may not hit us. It may hit us hard. Nobody has a crystal ball. But what we're doing is preparing for that so that...
Hedging.
Yeah, we're hedging.
Yeah.
We're getting ready. And if it never hits us, hey, we're in a great spot and we can continue to crush it. And if we do get hit, we can still handle it. So that part is like there's never a bad time to buy. So buy it. Part 2 of the nugget is find somebody that understands accelerated depreciation. Like if you don't know what that is, and there's probably a lot of even agents listening to this that don't know what that is, it gets next level. So you need a tax team that understands that and knows how to utilize that for you. No matter who it is, where it is, me and my team, we've got you covered. But not every tax practice understands that. Even really good CPAs don't understand that. And so you want to find a tax team or a CPA firm that actually does a lot of real estate work and can capitalize on your transactions, which a lot of mega wealthy do, and we won't go into that. But that would be part 2. And the third part of it is stop listening to like the news.
Yeah.
And all the people that think they know.
All the naysayers, all the negativity.
Yeah, like this one, I tell this all the time, and sometimes I feel like an ass when I say it, but like if you understand money in this country, when it is said that 1% owns 80% of the money, 1% of the people owns 80% of the money, it's mind-blowing, because that means when you're walking around, 99 people you talk to don't know what they're talking about. And one person does, and guess what? They're the crazy person, right? Now be cautious of scams and stuff like that. That's a whole different point. But like, look at them and like their reality, not what they're trying to flash, not fake money, not pretend, but like, what do they actually have, right? And what is their lifestyle like? And then it's like, they probably know things. Back when I made that comment, like there are products out there that they probably have access to that the general public doesn't. So like, that final comment is like, stop following the general. Like it's, we're in a system, and it's a grind, and it's kind of built to keep us in the system, ironically. And so I stand really strong in that, is like, you know what, buy stuff, understand accelerated depreciation, and stop listening to all the people that are going to tell you it's going to fail. Because I'll tell you what, I'm in a lot of groups with investors, different individuals, and we've done some mediocre plays, and they still work out.
They still work.
Out. Now we're doing some plays that are crushing it, and there's still occasionally we throw one in there that's like, that one didn't work, but it still works out, right? And so I love that. So if there's a naysayer, I don't have a lot of capacity to listen to them, and I invite everybody else who's listening to this, like, just put a screen up on that.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. I think you've given us a lot of good information. I think that you've answered the question of when somebody asks one of your clients, who's your agent, now people can have a better understanding of why Kyle Tucker should be their answer.
Absolutely.
If somebody wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
Probably the best way is just start with Instagram. It's easy to get to. The Kyle Tucker. I think I have an underscore on the end.
We'll link it all below.
Underscore. Yeah, we'll put it on there. Shoot me a DM. I've worked with referrals of referrals, friends. I've had random strangers reach out. I had a guy on LinkedIn just ping me. Never met the guy. Would love for him to hear this because he knows who he is. And he actually moved out of Utah for work reasons, but he's still engaged with me, and he's investing, which was a really cool experience. So would love to meet anybody out there and help him out.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.